So let's talk about a story that appeared yesterday in a feature story in the Standard. And this is with regards to hospitalization, seeking care in hospital, and then what happens to you if you do not have money to pay the bills. Yes? Ndu?
Yes. So it gave the particular story of a gentleman called Obonyo. And Obonyo he was in hospital for over a year. And his treatment occurred and the bills became quite high and he was unable to pay. So he would have been discharged from what we are seeing after, a particular point in time. But because of the fact that he could not pay, he stayed in hospital for a year plus. And the majority of that time he was actually well. But because he and his family rather were not able to meet or pay this bill, the hospital refused to let him go. And it became a long drawn out battle between himself and the hospital, and the Kenya National Human Rights Commission got involved, NHIF got involved, this, that, the other thing. And then finally, after this whole back and forth circus of events, he was finally let go, and he was giving his story about how this happened and what it was like literally living in hospital and not being allowed to go because of this bill that he had, which was in the millions. And thereafter, other people gave their accounts of how they had to stay in hospital. Somebody's bill at 400,000 and she was not able to pay. Neither was her family able to meet the bill. This is a secondary school student. And by the time they would have been released for hospital, her bill had reached something like 2.3 million shillings. And it was just occurring on a daily basis, because, you're in bed and you have, room and board in hospital and they're feeding you. And there were many, many stories. And I'm sure if you stuck your finger in the air, there are many people who would land in terms of those who suffer the same fate. People who've gone to hospital for a minor issue, people who've gone into hospital for a major issue, and then have not been able to pay their bills and have been kept in hospital. So it actually does sound like you're staying in hospital and you're being punished for not being able to pay your bill. And we're looking at cases that are authentic. And yes, indeed, we're looking at cases that are not. But the truth of the matter is that people who are not able, they're not lying about their situation. They're not able to pay a bill. And rather than find some kind of consensus, what has happened in a majority of cases is to keep these folks in hospital. And the bill continues to pile up and the bill continues to build, and hospital authorities are, none the pacifier when it comes to this. They want their dime. They took care of you when you were unwell, and they want to be paid for the services that were rendered. But then what happens is the question now for folk who are not able to pay. And we're not talking about don't want to pay. They're not able to pay.
If you think about it from the business of the people who are running this health facility, so you set up a health facility. Yes, you want to provide a service, but also you've got costs to run and you've got shareholders to report to. So what do you do when you're thinking about that? You see hospitals where they ask you, all right, first of all, before we admit you, let's ask whether you actually are creditworthy. Are you going to be able to pay for the services that we're going to be able to offer you here? Number one. Number two, even when you're still there, they keep coming to ask you, all right, so is your insurance in order? We have checked with your insurance and they have approved or they have not approved to a certain degree. Your NHIF has said, yes, they have approved up to this particular point, and the rest you're going to have to pay out of pocket. Are you going to be able to afford? So all these are conversations that are happening as you are still trying to battle a disease that took you to hospital in the first place. Is this a bad thing for a hospital administrator to do? Truth be told, yes, they're offering a service, but they are also running a business facility. It's an enterprise.
And if they do not abide by some of the basic business requirements, they will fold and close, which means now they are the ones who will be at a loss. And yet they'll be at a loss because they've been providing services for which they cannot realize what they expected to realize. You see, we look at health facilities as health facilities and forget that it is a business. And as a business, they actually need to stay afloat. It's not really that complicated. So, how do you balance it? Staying afloat and ensuring that the patients who come to hospital are also treated equitably. Yes.
But then there's also now the other issue of at what point do you look at the kind of service that you're offering vis-a-vis the community that you're serving? If you're in a certain area and you can clearly notice that most of the people who come here are not able to afford this service, what do you do? At what point do you make that decision to align yourself with the community you're serving? One. Two, and this one is a pet peeve of mine, is when it comes to emergency services. So somebody is knocked down on Mombasa Road, an accident, and you rush them to a private facility, nearest private facility. And the first thing that they say, okay, is, where this person, with the way we're looking at them, they require some sort of hospitalized care. They need to go straight into ICU or HDU. Now, put a deposit here of 600,000 shillings. And that is at 8 p.m. on a Saturday. These are things that have been reported by very many people. I'm sure if we opened up the phone lines right now, people will tell you in cases where they have taken a loved one or a stranger to a facility in the case of an emergency, and the first thing they were asked is, who's going to pay the bill? Do they have insurance? Can you put a deposit? How do you balance that? That's not about business. That's now being
extortionist.
Yes.
I think the conditions under how some of these things happen also is important to note. Let's look at the details of this particular subject of this story yesterday and how it was carried, right? Let me just give you some of the details so that you can understand. So this gentleman, which his name is Obonyo, right? He was unable to raise the 492,000 shillings bill upon his discharge in April last year, and he was in the ICU for 3 days from April 12th, right? And then he was to be discharged on the 19th of April. The bill by the 19th was this 492,000. Couldn't pay. So he was removed from the ICU, put in the normal ward. After being removed from the normal ward, he was then removed from the normal ward and put in an isolated room. And that was his home for a year.
So, okay, did he first get better? Like
Yes. He was to be discharged.
He needed to be discharged from ICU.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So he was to be discharged.
So he wasn't kicked out of ICU.
No. He was removed from ICU.
Okay.
Put in the normal ward, and he was then to be discharged. He was well.
Okay.
But he was not able to pay. He was then removed from the normal ward and put in this room, right? Now,
some swanky accommodation, basically, private room, right?
You would think. So what happens after this is that he stays in this room for a year and he's locked. It's not like you can walk about and have a fancy time, right? And he says it triggered a depression in him that escalated his blood pressure. He was not discharged even after presenting a title deed as surety. He remained locked despite pleading for a day off to attend the burial of his firstborn son, who had died in October. So he says that the life here was miserable, if you're asking about the swanky accommodation. Meals were not standard. A cup of tea and 2 slices of bread at 6 a.m. Missing lunch was the norm. Patients with pending bills are served after those in the wards. Meals were of low nutrition, according to him. Hot water for soup and a 300 ml bottled water for 24 hours is what he talked about. The earliest time that he received lunch was 4:30. Meals were then mostly mixed with water. He says poverty is bad. It's tough being locked up in a hospital because of failing to raise medical bills. It is more than being a prisoner despite undergoing the healing process. So he was exposed to sunshine when he could from 10 to 2 p.m.
So he was basically in detention.
Yes, he was in
Long
jail.
and short of it,
Because he came out to the sun for 3 hours in a day and then gone back to his isolated room. He had to stay in the room. There was a guard at his door. And
so the hospital basically has deployed a lot of resources to recover the money that you owe them. They have deployed a guard at your door. They are serving you meals. There is a bed. There is a room. All this is facility that they've basically just set aside for you so that they can recover money from you.
right, because
as you
if they do
continue
that,
accruing a bill.
they got to keep you alive in order for you to pay the bill, right? Because they don't, it's tantamount to killing you.
You actually question such kind of decisions. But let's bring in somebody who can help us understand some of these things and how hospitals then think, how administrators of hospitals think. Dr. Abdi Mohammed is the chairperson of the Kenya Private Hospitals Association. Dr. Mohammed, good morning.
Good morning, Eric, and good morning, Siti and
Ndu.
Undu.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr.
I was trying to say with
Yes.
You're trying to bring it out, right?
yes.
Dr. Mohammed, Ramadan Mubarak.
Thank you.
Now,
Thank you very much.
you know, Well, you've heard how we're introducing this story, and I'm sure you read the story that was featured in the Health and Science pullout of the Standard yesterday. When hospitals turn into detention camps, people are unable to pay their bills, patients are being locked up in poor conditions, adding to their misery. What would be the thinking behind this?
Unfortunately, each facility will have its own way of doing things. So some facilities will come up with strategies on not letting you in from the beginning, while others will find a way of either transferring you out in the middle, while others will be left hanging, not knowing what to do, and decide that at that point, whoever is in charge will make that call. Unfortunately, it's not uniform. So it's, as you have said, the hospital have spent more money keeping you than you left, you had before when you are discharged. So it's the personal decisions made by the facility. But I would say sometimes people or hospitals are forced to do certain things because the patient or the relatives have not come to the table to agree on how to go about the paying of the bill. That's the most unfortunate thing. You will find such a patient will be brought, the relatives will be visiting. When the time comes for discharge, everyone disappears.
Yep.
Then you are wondering now, where were all these people who are coming to see this person? They just left the person to you. You call them, they are all busy. But when you are treating, they were demanding you do certain things, even more advanced.
The best care you could give.
Do what you need to do, doctor. We'll take care of it.
Exactly. Unfortunately, that's what happened.
Is there an overarching principle over all of this where you say, regardless of what the situation may be, is there whether it be silent agreement that amongst hospitals that, look, if it gets to this point, this is what we will do? Because the number of cases, I mean, like we said, if we just said right now, everybody tell us your experience about somebody who's been stuck in hospital and has not been allowed to go because of pending bills, everybody would have a story. So are you saying essentially that there can be an agreement between facility and patients and their families if they just talked about it? Is that what you're saying? Across board?
Yes. That's why I told you it's individual facility decisions. But what some facilities do is they don't let you in to begin with. That's one of their strategies of reducing their burden of negotiating with people. So at the beginning, they will tell you no deposit. Without deposit, you are not going in. And if you go in and you finish your deposit, you are told to top up. When they see you are not topping up, they transfer you out because they have more demand for those beds for people who are willing to pay. So why would they keep you and you are unable to pay? But now comes in the smaller facilities. They don't have that capacity. So what do? They just keep you, thinking that somehow, somewhat, people will come through for you. There will be harambes or things like that. There will be some sort of deposit here and there. Someone will go for a loan somewhere. So they continue treating you, knowing that they hope for the best. The same way that they are hoping that you will get well is the same way that they hope your people or you will find a way of compensating them for the services that they have offered. So, but sometimes things don't go as you had hoped for.
There's something that I'm finding a little disturbing here. When someone is admitted to a hospital, it isn't as though it's something recreational. It's because they have a need. So at what point does the Hippocratic oath that medical individuals like yourself take and the commercial demands at what point do they meet? Because we understand it's a business that's being run. We also understand that there is the need to save and to ensure that human life is given the care it requires. How and where do you balance this?
Individually, as a clinician, I can forfeit my fee. But the question is, I want to use gloves to look after you. I want to test you. I want to give you medicine. But I don't own those things. Do you want me to go into my pocket to pay on your behalf? I will do the skills and tell you, okay, here I am. I'm a doctor, Hippocratic Oath. I will give you my knowledge. Give me the things to work with. So the question becomes, who takes care of the cost of those things that are needed to deliver this service? Because by looking at you, it's not enough for you to get well. By just saying that this is the problem and this is the management, word of mouth is not enough. I need things. So where do I get those things from, and who pays for those things?
I understand what you're saying, and you have responded really very well. But let me take the discussion a little further. By the time people come to a private hospital, there is a reason why, and they feel that they might get better service than they would in a public hospital. So the question is this: is it really true that the services you will get in a private hospital are of necessity better than the services you'll get in a public hospital?
I wouldn't say it's true. What people look at is the issue of turnaround time, conveniences, availability of certain things which might not be available in public facilities. But I can assure you there are some public facilities that do way better services than the private sector. So it's not uniform. But one thing that you need to realize is in this country, 50% of healthcare is provided by the private sector, especially hospitals, clinics. So by the time you have 50% of hospitals and clinics in the private hands or in mission hospitals, then you realize there was a demand. So sometimes it's not you are going to get better service, it's because the public facility is full, or it's very far from you, or you feel you don't want to share a bed or the hygiene or whatever it is that you feel you are not comfortable. So you opt for the private sector where you think I can actually pay something for these extra things that I need. But in terms of qualification of doctors who are in public and private, you will find very superior doctors in the public sector. And majority of the senior doctors are mainly in public sector, despite them practicing in the private sector as well.
At 21 minutes after 8, we're having a conversation with Dr. Abdi Mohammed. He is the founder and co-founder and CEO of London Hospitals, but also he is the national chairman of the Kenya Private Hospitals Association, talking about when hospitals turn into detention camps. Some questions are already coming in on social media, Dr. One is saying, really, doctor, that there are some private hospitals that will say, okay, one way of us dealing with the risk is demanding that deposit at the point of admission. And if you run out of the money that you had actually already deposited, you're told either top up or ship out. At that point, is that really fair? Should that even be allowed to happen?
You see, I just reported what happened.
Yes.
So whether it's legal or illegal, it's not for me to answer. But I'm just telling you, different hospitals have used different strategies on how they want to handle this issue. So as I've told you, even now, KUTRH, Kenyatta University Teaching and Referral Hospital, they wouldn't admit you without a deposit, and that's a public hospital. Go to even Kenyatta, KNH, in some instances, you will not be admitted unless you pay deposit, especially if you are doing electives or you have an insurance, which is NHIS. So it's just a way of making sure that that the bill will be catered for. But the question that we need as Kenyans to ask ourselves is, how do we want to pay for healthcare? And I can categorically tell you that paying out of pocket is impossible, even for the wealthiest, because the consumption is too high. So what you need is, what are the alternatives? We have to find a model of insurance that works, or public hospitals that are functional. And even in public hospitals, they need to have a way of being earning a revenue, or a way of maintaining what they have, unless they can get funding properly from Treasury. And that means more is allocated to the health sector. Those are the conversations that we need to discuss and say, okay, how do we get everyone on board on a health insurance? Because that's the only way. You need to pay for the sick, to be paid by the ones who are healthy. And the consumption is highest on the extremes, elderly and children. But the middle, who are supposed to are healthy and working, are the ones who need to be taking insurances. But they are the ones who say, I rarely fall sick, why do I need insurance? Without understanding that they are investing in their future as well.
Dr. Mohammed, do I understand you to be saying that if indeed something like the universal healthcare system that has been much talked about was actually implemented and was working, that would it possibly ease this situation that we're talking about?
Yes, definitely. I can give you an example.
Yes.
Dialysis. Before NHIF paid for, and before these medical equipment leasing put dialysis across the country, there were very few Kenyans who could afford to go to the private sector. The majority used to go to Kenyatta Hospital. Some used to even stay in Kibera, in other slums, because they came from other counties, they have no relatives, and they can't afford. The cost of doing dialysis used to be almost 100,000 a month. So how many families in Kenya have that cash readily available every month? And this is not something that you say, we'll do it for 1 month and then we are taking a break. It goes with the patient. There's no break. So you have to do it continuously. Then NHIF came and said, okay, pay 500 shillings and we'll pay for you your dialysis throughout the year. 6,000 shillings and you are covered. So, and it's now available almost in every county. There's a dialysis center you will find. The hospital or whoever is providing the service is happy because the NHIF is going to pay. You, as a patient, you are happy because you have only paid 6,000 shillings and you get your service within near your home. You don't have to travel and live in other places. So that's what money put together universally can do.
Okay. Now, it sounds great. It really does, Dr. because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, hold on a minute. We know that NHIF is 500 shillings a month, and I can see you smiling because you know what my next question is going to be. It sounds great. 6,000 shillings a year, and then I don't have to even worry, and then NHIF is going to pay for everything that I need. I could be in hospital and my bill comes to 400,000 shillings, right? And we have seen that if I had just been paying this 500 shillings per month, it's very possible that NHIF would cover the bulk of this medical bill that I have. So then my question becomes, why then do we not have people actually paying for NHIF? What is the problem? Or why don't we have more people on this canvas?
It's mainly, as I have told you, lack of understanding. And the majority of the people, you see, NHIF is not mandatory. So the majority of the people are self-employed in somehow, whether they are doing a hustle or a business or juakali. There is something that they are doing on their own. There is no one who is employing them, giving them a salary at the end. Because if you're employed, it's deducted automatically and no one asks you, and it's not 500. It's prorated to your salary.
Right.
It goes from 500 to 1,700 based on the 1,700 based on your salary. So the challenge is, as I have told you, is someone feels that they are invincible. You are young, The last time you even bought Panadol was, I don't know, 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So you ask yourself, why would I pay 500 shillings? Or you don't understand the benefits and the mechanism of how this financing works. That you don't realize that when you take it for your parents are the ones who will benefit more.
Yeah.
More than you. But with time, you will also benefit because, as you know, with health, you can never be sure when you will be unwell, unfortunately. You don't know when you will be in an accident. You don't know when something else will happen to you. We didn't know COVID will come, unfortunately. So that's how health is. One day you are fine, the next day your health just deteriorates. That unpredictability. And that's why we are saying it's better if people pool resources together. That's the only way you will be able to sustain health bills. Otherwise, we will have the same challenge of hospital bills being unpaid, hospitals looking for ways of recovering. Unfortunately, that's the reality of trying to pay out of pocket.
As we speak about this, and it's very, very true that, the issue of universal health care and finding a better scheme where everybody can then contribute, or as many people as possible can contribute, so that it takes care of our health, it's a good thing. Let's bring the conversation, though, mixing the same with what you then get at a private hospital or even at a public hospital in terms of how much it's going to cost. When we've had a conversation with the CEO of NHIF a number of times, he's told us one of the biggest challenges that the NHIF faces is fraud. And this is basically just leakage of a lot of money. And this is highly propagated in private hospitals, where you have basically gone into a private hospital and this is what you're supposed to be getting treated for. But somehow the bills are inflated. People have always complained, and many people have complained about going to hospital and finding inflated bills. Is there need or a justification for that conversation about regulating how much each service or each product should cost, even in a private or a public facility?
That would be great, and I don't think there's anyone who will say no to. But as you are aware, there are inputs for every procedure or things that will be done in a hospital. So if you come and the medication is not regulated, then I will not be able to come up with a price unless and until we do a costing for all the procedures and say this procedure for this kind of drugs, this is the amount. And unfortunately, you will find for the same treatment, there are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different types of drugs. The same drug, but different brands, different costs. So the question is, which one do I use? Which one do I not use? So as for fraud, yes, it's true. There are some private hospitals, and it's world over. It's not something that's unique to Kenya. It's just the percentages that differ in every country. So the question is, can that fraud happen without the knowledge of NHIF staff? No. Are there people whose sole purpose is to open those facilities to defraud NHIF? Yes. So that is where we are, unfortunately. So because in every market, you will find crooks who just show up and realize, I can do some business with NHIF. I have a cousin who works for NHIF, and this is how we are going to do. And they will do it, unfortunately, because they are colluding. So it's NHIF and the private sector to come up with ways of reducing that. Because I can totally tell you, nowhere in the world has medical fraud been at 0%. It's almost impossible.
But
so it's just to find what's acceptable, how low or how can you reduce by putting measures in place, biometric messages to the patient, to the doctor, just steps that you can take to reduce the fraud as much as possible. Yes.
But there's something for you as an association. I'm sure one of the things that you say as an association is that one, you are very good at lobbying, so collectively you have a lobbying voice, collectively you advocate for things that would go for the betterment of the private facilities. There's also the issue of self-regulation.
But it's an association, it's voluntary. So you think someone who wants to participate in fraudulent activities wants to participate in associations and lobby and be on the right path?
I'm
No.
sure not,
They
but
will-
that's where now
they will be lone rangers and they will continue doing their thing in cahoots with whoever they are working with.
surely, Dr. Mohammed,
Unfortunately.
now those law-abiding members of the association, can you, as a collective voice, call out those that are not doing things the right way? Report them to the board, report them to the authorities, caution the members of the public without even mentioning a name, but basically just describing what is happening and what to look out for in a facility that is openly and outrightly either defrauding its customers or defrauding the NHIF.
If we know, we would, but unfortunately, there are 5,000 facilities. Now, where do you start looking who is defrauding and who is, and do we even have that capacity to investigate and find out who is participating in these things? Our members, yes, we can call them out. But those who are not our members, now, unfortunately, it's difficult. It's NHIF to find a mechanism of surveillance, of strengthening its internal processes and finding out what's happening or which facility is. Because there are trends you can easily pick. Like you will find a facility is in a remote area where there are very few people. But the kind of invoices that they are giving you is ridiculous. So you need an internal process within NHIF intelligent enough to pick those things and say, this area and this facility, or have people from NHIF who will go and do surveillance and find out, are these people really serving who they are saying they are serving? Or are these fraudulent claims? And now if you have a biometric, hopefully that will even reduce, because it will mean the person whose card is being used to defraud has to come to the facility and put their fingerprints.
I want to move away from this discussion of NHIF and come back to doctors. Doctors have often been accused that when it comes to self-regulation, they will huddle together and protect each other. And that even the bodies that the doctors belong to that are supposed to help regulate the behavior and the conduct will do the same thing. They will huddle together and protect their own. And any sanction that would be expected will be long awaited. It's not something that comes easily. Would you say this accusation has any merit, Dr. Mohammed?
I don't think it has merit, because the people who, when you do self-regulation, you have an expert in the same field. I can tell you, if you are told today, you investigate and you are not a professional, a colleague in that field, or an expert, you don't have expertise in that field. If the doctor keeps on telling you, I've done X, Y, Z, and that's how it should be done, are you able to question the doctor? No. So every case will become based on your argument against his. So the question becomes between you, who is the expert? So it's always...
let me ask the question, an expert in what? In medicine, or in an expert in me and my condition?
In medicine. Like if he tells you, I have done as per the required standards.
Yes.
Acceptable.
Yes.
This is what I have done, this is what I have done, this is how I have done the operation, this is what I have done. And then he tells you that they accepted the method of doing this thing. But you feel that that was wrongly done. So you go to a regulator that has professionals. So the professionals in that field will question that doctor based on what he has done. And if he has done the wrong thing, they will call him out. And the punishments are stipulated in the act, in each act. So in each act, it has how or what are those punishments when someone is found guilty of doing the wrong thing.
Daktari, I like what you're saying, and it's music to my ears. How often does it actually happen?
Throughout the year. If you go to all the regulators, they will give you. They will give you people who have been registered. They will give you people who have been admonished. They will give you lists of people who have been told to go and retrain. They will give you people who have been told to go back and work under supervision. There are all those options for regulators on what to do when they found that their member was culpable of wrongdoing. And if you ask them, they will give you the data and they will tell you. And as I always say, it's better that person is held accountable by a fellow colleague.
Okay. Now, looking at, again, like when we said we come back to these many stories, and what would you think the solution would be now that we are saying so many people present themselves to hospital, somewhere along the line, they're unable to pay these bills because it is clearly a problem that, if we're not careful, could actually reach, worrying proportions. What would the solution be? Don't bring your kin to hospital. Don't come if you're not prepared. You never know what somebody had in mind by the time they're bringing them to hospital. What do you think the solution to this is?
So the solution, in my opinion, is, as I have told you, is our financing of health is what we need to work on. I have told you it's unsustainable and impossible to pay out of pocket. For the simple reason, because of the high cost of healthcare, it's impossible to sustain, and there's no one who have that kind of cash lying idle. So that's one. Number two, there's the issue of emergency care. That is enshrined in the Constitution and the Health Act, and there was supposed to be a fund for that emergency treatment. But unfortunately, it has never been set up in Treasury. It's still hanging as well. It has not been implemented. So that's also another solution for emergencies. But for generally, I would say let everyone, at the minimum, have an HIS card. At the minimum, 500 shillings as a family. And it's not even, you're not paying per person. It's if you have a family unit of father, mother, and 3 children, you still pay the 500 shillings. That's enough to cover all 5 of you. And that translates to 6,000. If you look backwards, you will find it's 12 shillings a day. I know there are many people who can't afford, but under the UHC, those families apparently have been identified, and the government has planned to pay for them, and they have paid starting July this year. Hopefully there will be almost 1 million households that will be brought to keep this person. And sometimes also you feel, maybe the hospital feels that the relatives or the patients are capable. So sometimes also you will find family dynamics. The person's family are capable, but just because they have issues internal, then they just disappear.
Yep.
So now you don't know what to do as a hospital. And as I have told you, as a hospital, you also have, like you have used oxygen on this patient. The person who supplied you has a contract with you as a hospital. The contract stipulates that you pay within 60 days. You don't pay the 60 days, he just stops supplying and tells you, clear the initial bill, then we can talk. After that, then you have other patients who are capable of paying. Now you cannot get supply for them because you have severed that relationship by not paying your suppliers on time. So now the question be, and then you have KRA who doesn't matter. That's a revenue. That's a revenue for you. For them, they don't care. They want to see how you have tried and you are unable to recover that money. What methods have you used for you to put it as a write-off? Otherwise, you will pay the tax, 30% out of that. So you are paying tax for a bill that you have never been paid. You are paying your suppliers. Then you have your staff who are professionals, nurses, doctors, who have looked after these patients. And then they also have families to look after. So you are in a catch-22 situation. You don't know which method. And that's why I told you some hospitals might be forced to use a barrier mechanism. And also sometimes also the patients. A patient is in the hospital bills are increasing, then you advise them, this hospital bill is increasing. Could we transfer you to a public hospital so that you continue with your treatment rather than incurring more bills? Then you are insulted and you are told, nani alikwambia tumeshindwa kulipa? And the day for discharge comes and all starts. So you wonder. Now, honestly speaking, people you gave an option out of this problem earlier who insulted you, and now here they are telling you we don't have money. Is that not deception? Now, how can you even accept their word again?
You know, it's a bit of a conundrum because I'm looking at the balancing act that those who are in this health private sector have to contend with. Let me ask this question, though. If the government's involvement was improved, what then it looks like is that the space that their non-involvement has provided would also reduce. And since I see more and more private hospitals coming up, I can only take the view that money is being made from it. People do not open up ventures so that they can lose money. They open up ventures so that they can make money. Again, I'm bringing this to you. What would be the balance? Should the government, in your opinion, of course, perhaps take a bigger role in healthcare? Or should they simply leave the status quo as it is and let the private sector fill in this gap?
Not really. The government has a big role. And if you look at the Health Act, it says under Section 88, 1, subsection 1, the Cabinet Secretary shall pursue strategies conducive to the development and regulation of private health service and their attunement to the needs of the population. Number 2, the public and private health service and facilities shall complement each other in the provision of comprehensive and accessible healthcare to the people. So it's complementation. So now, how do you complement each other? It's many things that the government can do. Yes, it can invest more in the public sector, allocate more funds to the Ministry of Health or the counties, or even push the counties sort of ring-fence the health budget and say that out of the money that we give you as a county, this amount of money will only be used in health and nothing more. That you cannot use it for any other purpose. The money that you collect from hospitals will only be used to improve the hospitals. So that's one way of saying, okay, we are increasing our budget allocation.
Yeah.
Then the second option is to go through insurance, pay for people who can't afford, strengthen NHIF, and then allow NHIF now to seek health service for its members across, whether it's public or private sector, so that patients have a choice on where to go. Then also come in on the other side, of course, but I understand the government also needs to balance its budget, is remove levies and taxes on health products and health items, whether it's drugs, whether it's equipment. But you see, at the same time,
it's a revenue source. It's a revenue source for government. Dr. Abdi Mohammed, thank you very much for the conversation this morning. Thank you for joining us. We hope to speak to you again soon.